Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for the 6th weekly reader. And I want to start this by pitching my other channel, to which I will leave a comment pinned in the comments section. If you hit my icon on that, it'll take you straight over to the other channel. I've started an Ask Me Anything series over there, and a lot of the questions that I've gotten have been book related, so I wanted to go ahead and make sure that if you are here for book talk, just know there will be some book talk over there as well. It's just not the primary focus. In fact, the primary focus of that channel is sort of all over the place. I'll be talking a little bit about investing, a little bit about movies. I'll be talking a little bit about movie news, investing in movie news coming weekly. But I have, like I say, started the Ask Me Anything series, and I'm also going to start doing more storytelling over there. So if storytelling is something that you're interested in, I will be doing that over there as well, mainly autobiographical. But I am aiming this month to do 31 videos in 31 days, and I am so far on pace to do that. So I would really appreciate it, and hopefully be providing something for you if you go over there and hit that subscribe button and join me over there as well, as we are also nearing 200 subscribers. And in fact, that Ask Me Anything series started as what was going to be an Ask Me Anything video, just one episode of Ask Me Anything to celebrate hitting 150 subscribers, but we've already nearly eclipsed 200. We're close. We've got 194. So it would really mean a lot to me if you could go over there and subscribe there as well, and hit the like button if you're here, you son of a bitch. Anyway, on to the reading that we've been doing this week. So the Shining series is about to wrap up on the channel. And following that, we're going to be going into Stardust. I know everything's backwards. I know it. I can't fix it. I looked at the settings on the camera. If anyone knows how to flip, someone said that the image was flippable on here, but I can't figure it out. I'll have to YouTube it or something. But ironically, we are finishing up The Shining on this channel on the same day that my review for the Shining novel happens on this channel. A review for the movie will happen on my personal channel. Again, a comment will be pinned in the comment section for that channel. But I finished and posted the final read-along episode for, I've got so many books on my desk right now, it's embarrassing, for Absalom. And I gotta say, I was hoping to do the review the same day as that final part of the read-along, but I don't have it yet. Guys, I don't have it yet. I'm still trying to figure out what I think of this novel. I'm still trying to figure out what I think of it. I don't even have a rate. Like, normally, as soon as I finish a book, in my gut, I know how to rate it. I give it a number rating. Some people think that's heretical. I don't care. I don't care what they think. It's something that is often used in movies, and it's something that makes a review easily digestible and gives a sort of point of purchase, to really start to form an argument against what someone else thinks. And that's hopefully what I'm providing with reviews and read-alongs on this channel. Reviews more than read-alongs. Read-alongs are really mainly just discussion about the books, but the reviews are, I really want to promote a difference of opinions in the comment sections to that. So next Monday, this coming Monday, the review for Absalom will drop. I'm just gonna have to dump a whole lot of time into it to figure out exactly where to go with it. I don't. So the reviews, if you've never seen one of the reviews on the channel, it's 3 good things, 3 bad things, quotes, literary discussion, rating, and recommendation based on the text. I don't even have my 3 good things and 3 bad things yet. Normally, I try to work on these things as the reading is happening for the book. I'm just so lost with this text. I skipped last week the Plath poem, which I was going to do, which was Insomniac. I didn't have a take on it. So instead of moving that to this week, I'm going to press forward and continue with It Gives Me Pause. by Langston Hughes. I will have a discussion for It Gives Me Pause on Thursday. Following Absalom, we're going to be moving into An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen. We're going to continue making our way through Ibsen's plays. I'm going to read the back of this book. Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen, 1828 to 1906, brought the social problems and ideas of his day to center stage. Love the pun. Creating realistic plays of psychological conflict that emphasized character over cunning plots, he frequently inspired critical objections because his dramas deemed the individual more important than the group. In this powerful work, Ibsen places his main character, Dr. Thomas Stockman, in the role of an enlightened and persecuted minority of one confronting an ignorant, powerful majority. When the physician learns that the famous and financially successful baths in his hometown are contaminated, he insists that they be shut down for extensive repairs. For his honesty, he is persecuted, ridiculed, and declared an enemy of the people by the townspeople, including some who have been his closest allies. First staged in 1883, the work remains one of the most frequently performed plays by a writer considered by many the father of modern drama. So, again, An Enemy of the People is going to be starting the Monday after this Monday. So next Monday following. Following Absalom, we will be going through An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen, which gets us into stuff for this episode. Yesterday I was watching the Jocko podcast, or rather I was listening to it as a proper podcast, even though it does have a video element here on YouTube. And I learned something I did not previously know. I did not know that Omar Bradley, the general from World War II, was a Missouri boy. So that was interesting to me. There was a point in my life where I really thought that sort of thing meant something, and I tried to get more into... I've got a beautiful David McCullough Truman biography, which I've never read because Truman is from Missouri. I did read a biography on Jesse James called Jesse James, Last Rebel of the Civil War by T.J. Stiles. It is beautifully written. I will read Chapter 1, The Preacher. In the blind man's memory, the river ran west. It was in the spring of 1846 when young Francis Parkman had first looked on the Missouri, and he had seen clearly that its wide and silty waters flowed east to Mississippi. But when he closed his faltering eyes in a clinic on Staten Island in 1847 and began to dictate the rest of the story dictate the story of his adventure of the previous year, he had already begun to think like the great historian he would soon become. As he scanned in his mind the lines of passengers and clots of wagons and piles of goods crowding the St. Louis levee, as he recalled the sound of steamboat paddles slapping and churning against the Missouri's current, he could see the life of the nation pulsing westward, up the river, like blood cells pouring through an artery. In the most important sense, the river ran west. Again, it's a beautifully written biography, but it really outlines a lot of the character that was Jesse James, and just a couple stories that have stuck with me through the years. One, Jesse and his brother Frank, they used to rob everything. They would rob everything, including stagecoaches, which, if I remember correctly, Frank hated doing, and Jesse thought was beneath him. But when you need money, you need money. And when banditry is the way you get your money, well, stagecoaches make easy fare. So they were robbing a stagecoach, which was a man and a woman one evening. And Jesse liked the attention. So here he was robbing the stagecoach, and he takes off his mask, tears it off. And the woman gasps and says, "I know you, I recognize you." And he says, "Is that right, ma'am? So who would I be?" And she says, "Well, you're Frank James." And he says to her, "No, ma'am, I am much better looking than that dog Frank James. While he was robbing the stagecoach with his brother Frank James. That's just a funny story. And another one that really sort of lets you in on the character that was Jesse James. Another story of banditry. At this time, he was frequenting his mother's house. His mother lived in Nebraska. In both of these stories, I might have some elements wrong. I did not go back to read them, but the essence of the story is here. He was carousing about with his friends, and there was, along the fence posts of a farm, a saddle that was, I don't know, drying or something. I don't know what it was doing there. I think maybe it had just been finished. And Jesse James decided that saddle looked mighty fine. So he snake crawled up to the fence, and as he raised up to grab the saddle, pop! Whoever's farm it was had been paying attention and sent a bullet into Jesse James. Well, they managed to escape, him and his friends. They rounded him up, got him on his horse, got him back to his mother's house. His mother, again, living in Nebraska at the time, and that is an important fact of the story, because back then, you were as likely to die from the flu as from someone shooting at you, because the guns didn't aim well, and, well, the bullets weren't all that impactful. So, if the bullet didn't hit you somewhere immediately fatal, you might live, which you might wish you didn't. Jesse lived. I think the bullet lodged in his chest below his lung, below his left lung, maybe. So every breath hurt, right? Every breath was stinging death, burning death. So they took him back to his mother's house, and he was posted up on the couch, dying. And actually, if you got shot, you were more than likely going to die of infection from the wound, not the bullet. But anyway, he's dying. He thinks he's dying. He's on the doors of death, and he asks his friends and his brother, "Look, I'm gonna die. Do me the favor of taking this couch out and going just south of the border, the Nebraska border, so that I can die in Missouri, because I don't want to die in a Yankee state." What? You're about to die, and instead of dying in the comfort of your mother's home, you have them move, and they did. They moved the couch outside, south of the border, into Missouri, so they didn't have to die in a Yankee state. Just a funny story. But Jesse James, like the book says, a rebel. Rebel. So I want to read one of my new favorite Emily Dickinson poems. This comes to us from 247 of the collected works. I'm seated, I've stopped being theirs. Poem 508. I'm seated, I've stopped being theirs. The name they dropped upon my face with water in the country church is finished using now. And they can put it with my dolls, my childhood, and the string of spools I've finished threading too. Baptized before without the choice, but this time consciously of grace unto supremest name. Called to my full, the crescent dropped, existence's whole arc filled up with one small diadem. My second rank, too small the first, crowning on my father's breast, a half unconscious queen, but this time adequate, erect, with will to choose or to reject. And I choose just a crown. That is one of my new favorite Emily Dickinson poems. Just that opening statement, I'm seated. I've stopped being theirs. There's something there, man. But I try to always have a poem and something from the Literary and Thematic Terms Dictionary, which comes to us from Checkmark Books. And you start thinking about rebels, rebel, and it's difficult if you're thinking about rebels and literary criticism to not think eventually of the man that was Jacques Derrida. So, I will read the definition. Where is it here? What the hell am I doing? Of deconstruction. Page 78 on this, a dictionary of literary and thematic terms by Edward Quinn. Deconstruction. Although in popular use a term synonymous with deconstruction or debunking, deconstruction also has a more precise, if highly complex, reference. As used in literary criticism, philosophy, and more recently, legal studies, it focuses on the inherent internal contradictions in language and interpretation. As formulated by the French thinker Jacques Derrida, deconstruction is a fundamental critique of certain intellectual assumptions that underlie Western thinking. According to Derrida, Western thought and culture have been organized around unacknowledged presuppositions, centers, that both structure and restrict meaning. These centers appear as self-evident truths that lie outside the system of language. One example might be the human spirit, a phrase that implies the existence of transcendent reality, as do terms such as God or consciousness, that forms the basis of meaning. Derrida calls this belief logocentrism, the assumption of an ultimate ground or referent for language. Against the logocentric conception, Derrida argues that meaning is not generated by some extralinguistic presence, but by absence, that is, by the difference between one word and another. Thus, it is difference, not the traditional identity of the word and its object, that distinguishes language. In other words, language is rooted not in a positive relation of words to the word, but instead in a relation of difference of one element from another. Language does not reveal things as they are, it imposes categories on the world. Meaning is a function of the fact that our pictures of reality are the products of these linguistically derived categories. In America in the 1970s, these ideas were taken up and applied to literature by the Yale critics, Paul Damon, J. Hillis Miller, Jeffrey Hartman, and at one time on the periphery of the group, Harold Bloom, favorite of the channel. Adapting and applying some of Derrida's ideas, they helped to create an atmosphere in which deconstruction became the center of an intense controversy. In general, the American deconstructionist movement is not a theory but a method, partly philosophical, partly literary, of reading texts. In this respect, as in others, deconstruction is directly opposed to structuralism, which attempts to discover the underlying grammar of literature. The deconstructive method zeroes in on a specific text, much in the manner of the close reading approach that characterized new criticism. But the deconstructionist aim, in Hartman's words, quote, to see through literary forms to the way language makes or breaks something, end quote. Central to this method is Derrida's concept of difference, a word he coins to difference, a word he coins to distinguish from simple difference. Derrida employs the word in both senses in the French verb déferer, which means both to differ and to defer. Derrida loved that. He loved toying with the meaning of sounds versus their written, the way they look, the way they sound versus the way they look. The sense of differ in the term refers to Saussure's view of the meaning of words is in a function of differences, and that these differences are, quote, negative, that is, distinguished by what they are not. The sense of differ applies to the belief that meaning is never really present, but always deferred because the meaning is simply more words leading to a cycle of words about words. Operating from this principle, deconstructionists scrutinize the contradictory elements in a text until they reach aporia, an impasse, the point at which the text's contradictory meanings are shown to be irreconcilable. The result is an illustration of the indeterminacy of meaning. Attacked as an irresponsible game, a denial of common sense, or empty nihilism, deconstruction, and that's where Jordan Peterson comes into play. Jordan Peterson does a lot of that. Versus instead of trying to see what's going on there, he seeks to dismiss it, just as some deconstructionists seek to dismiss the meaning of the text. It is an irony, but nonetheless it happens. In the narrow sense of the critical school, appears to be on the wane. Its decline has been hastened by the revelation that the chief American practitioner, Paul de Man, has written some 200 articles for 2 pro-Nazi newspapers during the German occupation of Belgium in World War II. As a result, some critics of deconstruction have made efforts to link deconstructive criticism to totalitarian thought, which is, ironically, exactly what Peterson tries to do. But despite its decline, many of deconstruction's ideas, particularly those related to decentering of the subject and the rejection of the idea of single meaning, have been incorporated into the mainstream of academic critical thinking. The question of whether that influence will spread outside of the universities into the world of general readers remains open. And it has. Boy, and how. When was this? This has to be 15 years old, I think. Written in 99, so 21 years old. Anyway, so that's that. I think I'm going to go into a little bit of Stardust. This comes to us from page 20, and this is a complete change in direction. But it took me by surprise because it's such a change in direction from this text itself. So I figured I would maybe debut it here. It's gonna be included in chapter 1 read along as well. But this book, if none of you have read it, it reads very much like a child's text until page 27. There was a moment of hesitation, and then her mouth opened against his, and her tongue slid into his mouth, and he was under the strange stars, utterly, irrevocably lost. He had kissed before with girls of the village, but he had gone no further. His hand felt her small breast through the silk of her dress, touched the hard nubs of her nipples. She clung to him hard, as if she were drowning, fumbling with his shirt, with his breeches. She was so small. He was scared he would hurt her and break her. He did not. She wriggled and writhed beneath him, gasping and kicking and guiding him with her hand. She placed 100 burning kisses on his face and chest, and then she was above him, straddling him, gasping and laughing, sweating and slippery as a minnow, and he was arching and pushing and exulting, his head full of her and only her. And had he known her name, he would have called it out loud. At the end, he would have pulled out. But she held him inside her, wrapped her legs around him, pushed against him so hard that he felt the two of them occupied the same place in the universe, as if for one powerful, engulfing moment they were the same person, giving and receiving as the stars had faded into the pre-dawn sky. I thought this was a kid's book until a sex scene that includes an orgasm. Holy shit. But, not to be outdone, I think we should go to Stephen King in Danse Macabre on page 69. Nice. Where we get of sex scenes in horror, this passage. But maybe there's even more going on here sexually than first meets the eye. Early on, I mentioned my own belief that much of the horror story's attraction for us is that it allows us to vicariously exercise those antisocial emotions and feelings which society demands we keep stoppered up under most circumstances, for society's good and our own. Anyway, Dracula sure isn't a book about normal sex. There's no missionary position going on here. Count Dracula, and the weird sisters as well, are apparently dead from the waist down. They make love with their mouths alone. The sexual basis of Dracula is an infantile oralism coupled with a strong interest in necrophilia, and pedophilia, some would say, considering Lucy in her role as the Bloofer Lady. It is also sex without responsibility, and in the unique and amusing term coined by Erica Jong, the sex in Dracula can be seen as the ultimate zipless fuck. This infantile, retentive attitude towards sex may be one reason why the vampire myth, which in Stoker's hands seems to say, "I will rape you with my mouth and you will love it," instead of contributing potent fluid to your body, "I will remove it," has always been so popular with adolescents still trying to come to grips with their own sexuality. The vampire appears to have found a shortcut through all the tribal mores of sex, and he lives forever to boot. So I think part of what we're saying here, and part of the argument that King is making, is that in types of genre fiction, such as horror, when you introduce the element of sex, it is sort of like the opposite of a power fantasy. So a power fantasy in comic books, basically the Hulk. Don't make me mad, because normally I'm a weakling, but if you make me mad, I'm the most powerful thing there ever was. It's a power fantasy. Sex in these types of genre fiction is sort of the opposite. It is sort of in effect, a voyeurism. It is a removal of the self from the sexual act and perversion, while allowing the self to still experience. So the sex scene in Stardust is weird, and it is with a character that is not human. But that doesn't stop the protagonist, and it doesn't stop the reader. And I don't know how many other books that these things happen with Neil Gaiman, but Neil Gaiman is someone who is very popular with adolescents. So maybe that is part of it. Like Stephen King mentions, the presence of sex in the absence of responsibility. But that's all I have for this week on episode 6 of The Weekly Reader. I hope to see you back next week for episode 7, and later this week for all the poetry and novels that we'll be reading.